Our guest tonight, Roberta Degnore, says that she's been there and still doing that and using it all. She goes on to say she's a uniformed schoolgirl, slouching activist, marathoner, benign druggie, solo traveler, novelist, psychologist, filmmaker, and gay when it wasn't cool. She's been detained at both the Russian and Canadian borders, has skied over a cliff, searched the dark East Berlin streets for gay bars, and got through security with a bowl of Coke in her pocket. And then there's this trailer.
Hey, I'm a prisoner of the 1960s. I tuned in, turned on, dropped out. I travel the world alone to prove that I can. I still pick up women. I'm ready to talk about my secrets. I have the joy of being a professor. I teach, and I learn from my students. I found the freedom of being able to be me.
This is going to be quite an evening. Roberta, come on in.
Hello, Amber. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, Roberta, this is amazing. Thank you so much. All right, we've got a lot to talk about, but I'd like to know where it all started. Tell us about your childhood.
Well, I grew up in Detroit, which is a great place to be from and then leave. But I had a great upbringing, partly because of my cousin Joe, who was an artist, who I hung out with, although he was, 10 years older than I. He would take me along to jazz clubs downtown, and people would say, "You can't bring that kid's too young." And he would just keep walking. No one messed with Joe, with 6'3" tall Joe. And then because of because it was Detroit and it was really the heyday in the 1960s, I hung out with the Panthers and I worked with the Panthers and did whatever I could to help, which we will still not talk about to this day.
And why won't we talk about it?
Well, that was back in the day when people were doing things to fight the police, to take people across the border to safe houses in Canada, which I did. But you're not going to record that, no.
Where did this sense of activism come from?
I think probably again, maybe starting with Joe and my Italian immigrant grandparents. Joe's studio mate was Anthony, a young man of color, married to a white woman, and he would bring them over to my grandparents' house for dinner on Sundays. Neighbors would come out and watch from their porches. My grandfather would sit there on his porch in his broken Italian, make references to the shotgun he kept in the basement. He said, "They want to watch? I'm going to give us something to watch." So this feeling of inclusion or acceptance was really kind of with me from the beginning because of my family. They were pretty cool, except for my mother, but that's another story.
I'm sure there's a book there someplace. Yeah. What was your impetus to leave Detroit, and where did you go?
The impetus to leave Detroit was my mother outing me when she found out I was gay. Engaging a lawyer to get that woman fired. She was an assistant professor at Wayne State University.
And how old were you at the time?
I must have been 18 or 19. Let's see, if I'm shaving 10 years off my life, it'll be less than that. So when, I had to go see the attorney and he asked me, is this true? Are you doing it? And I learned quickly. I said, absolutely not. No, I have no idea what she's talking about. And I packed my car, a little Carmen Ghia, and left town after that and came to New York and have been here ever since.
Why New York?
Oh, because New York was Mecca. From those days in the 60s and 70s, you always hear about, New York was so cool, and a gay haven. A place to be. And also my Uncle Bob, who I also really revered. He was another idol of mine. My closeted Uncle Bob, I should add, right, who taught me about opera and who would always say, excuse me, you should travel, you should go to New York. New York is fabulous. You have to see New York. Although he'd only been once himself, and that stuck with me, you know.
What did you do when you got there?
I found a place to live, unpacked my little Carmen Gia, and then started finding all the girl bars in town. Every one of them.
Tell me some of the names of those bars.
Oh my God, there was Bonnie and Clyde. There was the Sahara uptown, the gold earring set, I call them uptown. Bonnie and Clyde's Ariel down in the Village. And oh my God, I'm blocking on the name, where they had the mafia bouncer at the door, the Duchess on 7th Avenue. There would always be a heavy-set mafia guy at the door in a shiny suit with a lump in his coat, you know, for his gun. I mean, really, that was, you know, we're talking, the late 1960s, early 1970s.
So this was right around the time of Stonewall.
Yeah, just about then, which I missed Stonewall. I missed it.
But you hadn't got there yet? Is that why you missed it?
No, I missed it, and I was living in another part of town when I was there, but certainly I was around for the aftermath and the marches, and still do. I'm still in the streets. God, I'm too old for this.
Bless you. What were you doing to make a living during that time?
Oh, I got a job at NYU and was also going to school at New York University. So I got some funky job in the office because I could do it, and that kept me afloat. So it worked out. I was working and going to school.
What were you studying?
At that time, filmmaking. I got a certificate in filmmaking and then went into psychology.
That's interesting. Why psychology?
Because I'd always wanted to be a doctor. There you go. No, no, because I really wanted to say why we do the stuff we do and kind of figure out human behavior, dealing with my mother and my brother, which is another story. But there's a weird thing, although I wanted to do that, to have that intimacy, the thought of really being medical and putting your hands on some stranger is like, I'm ashamed to admit it, but it really turns me off to really be hands-on, listening to hearts and being there for them. I can't do that. I'm much too iffy and too much of a snob for that. I'm sorry.
After you graduated, what was your next step?
When I graduated from school, I got a couple of jobs doing consulting work, and then I started being interested in art. Well, art dovetailed with it because a woman who had met one of my long-term partners then. Well, we used to call them lovers, remember? When it was much more, yeah. And now it's, partner, husband or wife. Please don't even let me start on that. But she was an artist, and she was the one who introduced me to Sam and Robert. And because of that art background with my cousin Joe, him, and then her being in New York and going to the openings on Saturday all up and down West Broadway, from OK Harris to, oh my God, I can barely remember the names anymore. We would hit all of them. So I was in the occasion of sin, in the occasion of art. And so while I was studying psychology, because that appealed to me, my dissertation was on the experience of public art in urban settings. What does a work of art do? How does it make one feel? So that's why.
All right, you mentioned Sam and Robert, and we're going to talk about them in just a minute, but right now we're going to take a short break for something else. We'll be right back. We're back with Roberta Degnore. Now, Roberta, you mentioned Sam and Robert. Tell us who Sam and Robert were.
Well, Robert is Robert Mapplethorpe, and Sam is Sam Wagstaff. Sam was the man who made Robert Mapplethorpe, I think, although others might disagree. Certainly Robert was a genius and did fabulous work, but without Sam's backing and love, I think it would have been certainly would have been a harder road for Robert. And not.
What was Sam doing? What was his job, or who was he?
Sam was a curator and collector. He used to be the curator of, was it modern art at the Detroit Institute of Arts, where my girlfriend then had met him. So we had a loft on the Bowery. Sam had a loft on the Bowery and Bond Street. She said, "You've got to meet him. He's fabulous." And all the while we were walking up the Bowery, we almost came to blows. She said, "Don't say anything. He's fabulous. He's famous. He can do a lot for you." I'm like, "Oh, geez, enough, you know." She said, "Don't talk to him." I'm like, "Don't talk to him." And
So what was he doing in New York? You said he was in Detroit,
but he had to leave Detroit, not had to leave, but he quit his job there because he installed a piece of our 35-ton drag mass displacement that tore up their lawn. It was Michael Heiser's piece, and the board of directors didn't like it. So he thought it was better to move to New York, as I did. And what was funny about that meeting, if I just, sorry to go on, we hit it off immediately. After my being told that, don't say anything, don't speak until spoken to. It's like, God, it's like going to your mother, So we hit it off instantly.
And how did you meet Robert?
Robert was there that day. Robert was at Sam's place, a very quiet, skinny guy with a really terrible skull bracelet on his hand that he had made. And what Sam wanted to do, my girlfriend was a metalsmith. Sam wanted her to instruct Robert on how to do it better, how to make it better. So while she kind of pontificated to Robert about what to do with metal, and she was expert at metal. That's true. I shouldn't discount that. Sam and I smoked our brains out. We're smoking cigarettes, and then he said, "We smoked some weed," and then we smoked some weed. But we smoked all of my cigarettes and all of his weed. And for all the years, I knew Sam, 15 years, I never saw him buy his own cigarettes. He always smoked mine.
So you met them, you had a connection there. Where did it go from there?
Where it went from there, we would do things like we'd go to openings together, hit the West Broadway galleries and things. And there was a bit of a problem because my girlfriend she wanted an opening with Sam's backing. She wanted something. I didn't want anything for him. Me, I was in graduate school in psychology and writing romances. And when he asked me what I did, she had instructed me I wasn't to mention that because that was not artistic enough, writing historical novels. It paid all our bills, but I wasn't to mention that. Anyway, I did mention it, and he was totally interested. So that was one of our connections. I would, share with him historical facts I had found out, that I'd, found out very photography studios down on Leonard Street, and that in New York in the early 19th century, their garbage disposal system were bands of roving pigs. So that was so little facts like that. He loved it. He had a voracious appetite for information. So that's how we hit it off. And then we kind of broke off from, that woman and I broke up, and it allowed, and without her pressure to get something from him, then we could really relax and hang out.
Tell me about that hanging out. Who did you hang out with?
We mostly, there were these pristine days. He moved from his loft on the Bowery and Bond Street, this is about 1975, into the penthouse at 1/5 Avenue, one of the penthouses at 1/5 Avenue. And that's when his photography collecting really ramped up speed. So I'd go to his place on, any afternoon, and there would be piles on the floor. Julia Margaret Cameron, LeGray's, God, I'm trying to block any, De Meyer photographs worth tens of thousands, $50,000 each. And they'd be on piles on the floor, and Sam would have a joint dangling from his lips, and he'd say, "Here, take a look at this." And ashes, I'd say, "Sam, stop." Look, he said, "No, it's fine. It'll be fine." He wasn't precious with these precious photographs. So we would talk about it. He would tell me about, collodion prints as opposed to, whatever. Geez, I should have tried to remember the things that he told me. And I always thought, we'll do this again. And we did do it again. we'd smoke, we'd hang out. Sometimes Robert would come by, but not much, because what had happened during that time was Robert was exploring the S&M bars, and he was into men of color, and that's when that really started ramping up. And he sent Sam a gift from San Francisco to take his mind off Robert being around less. And that gift was Jim Nelson.
Tell me who that is.
Jim Nelson was very handsome, ex-Texan living in San Francisco, who was well endowed, should I say that, and a fun guy. He could be fun, but he was the total opposite of Robert. And I think this is why Robert sent him, because he was no threat ever to taking Robert's place with Sam. The sex might be plentiful and unique or whatever, but he was never taking Robert's place because he could barely read a menu. Although he was a nice guy, he could be fun. He would write letters, fan letters, to his dear friends, Shelley Winters, who he'd never met. And what he was doing hair for all my children when he got here. He got a job doing all my hair, and he would, as I say, he could be fun. He could be great fun, but he was also not letting go of Sam. Not ever. For that. So that was Jim Nelson. Robert's gift to Sam, to let him be occupied while Robert was running around at the bars.
Now, was Robert doing his photography at this time?
Yeah, Robert was, yes. His photography was really ramping up, yeah. Shortly after that, he went to, what was the name of that island? Mesquite, where the Queen's sister, Queen Elizabeth's sister, the bad sister who married the photographer. Was it Margaret? Right.
Oh, Margaret, yes.
There. Mick Jagger was there and all of that. And Robert would send little love notes back to Sam, so to keep their relationship fresh. But I don't want to be too negative about that, because Sam really loved him. There was nobody ever like Robert for Sam, and ever. It was, they were, no matter who went with who or who partied with whom, they were solid, the two of them.
So Robert comes back to New York, and then what happens?
And then he keeps on with his photography. Sam helps him out. His career gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and just balloons, so that he's the man of the hour. And Sam stays in the background, the collector, although, he's on museum boards and stuff, and gives interviews. He was on the Dick Cavett show. Dick Cavett interviewed him and things. But he would say, he said, you don't want to get a very deep voice. He said, well, you wouldn't want to be famous, would you? You would rather be rich. That's much better, isn't it? He ought to know. Right? He ought to know.
All right. You must have been traveling in some very interesting social circles with those two. Tell me about some of those parties.
Okay, well, one, certainly a prominent one is there was a party at Andy Warhol's. He spaced down on, what was it? Not Bond. Jones, on Great Jones Street. That was it. And that was a terrific party, just as you would expect, full of, people of every kind and famous. And Fran Lebowitz was there. I remember very distinctly. And of course, everybody was smoking and stuff. And I thought, wow, I would really like to get next to Fran Lebowitz. That's cool. So I tried to approach her, but she had this big girlfriend with her. And it was one of those, I really thought it was, pretty much being shoved out of the way. So I went to find Robert and Sam. I'm like, Sam, I'm in trouble. I think she's going to come find me. And of course we were all high and stuff. And I said, what? I tried to talk to her, but she's got this big, mean girlfriend, and I couldn't. And Sam was very tall, looked over my head, and he said, yes, and she's coming this way. I'm like, what? Then he cracked. He was kidding, and Robert smirked, and we all laughed. That's the way we could be with each other, goofy. And I think that's what Sam liked about me. What I liked about him, I could make him laugh. He wasn't the stuffed shirt, super rich, old Yankee money anymore. I bought him toys that his socialite mother never got for him that he enjoyed. So yeah, so at least that was one party. There was another. Would you like another example?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. This was at the very swank townhouse of Joel and Anne Ehrenkrantz. Joel Ehrenkrantz was involved in, it wasn't a Ponzi scheme, it was a stock scandal back, this must have been, mid 70s. I can't remember the name of him, but anyway, he was prominent beyond being a broker. So in this really lovely townhouse, it's like 4 floors, there were people, dressed in gowns. There had been an opening, and Sam said, well, come with me to the library. So they had a library with, as you would expect, a library, beautiful rectangular table in the middle, bookshelves around. And there was maybe 8 or 9 of us, a lawyer who I won't mention now because I'm afraid he's a lawyer. He might sue me for this. Anyway, they started passing around Coke with, lines as fat as giant caterpillars, right? So it was coming around, and I was in mid-story. God knows what story I was telling. But I was in Motormouth's story. We had probably done some other stuff before. And Robert handed it to me, and I said, yeah, talk it. And I took the straw, and I put it in my mouth. The most horrible thing I have ever done in my life. It was like, Robert quickly gave me his wine. Sam, he just looked at me and he said, well, that's enough for you, more for me. And he took and he sucked up the rest of mine, and he wet his finger and sucked up all the rest that was on the plate. He was not good at sharing drugs. Well, he was good at sharing drugs sometimes, but that was like a boon for him. I was humiliated, of course, and hoping no one saw it. But Robert, who I used to call Mr. Bitchy, was really kind. Sam was just, okay, fine, more for me. Robert was, are you all right? Here, have some wine. So that was my most humiliating moment probably ever in life at a swank party.
How much time did you spend with them?
How much? I knew them over the course of 15 years until they both passed away. But with Sam, certainly more time with Sam. I would go by on afternoons 2 or 3 times a week at least, and when he got sick, there would be phone calls every day, and I'd be there every day for those last year and a half, 2 years. It was pretty horrible. It was,
the 70s. I had fun in the 70s and early 80s, but I was in the Midwest. You must have had a lot of fun there in New York City.
Yeah. It was. There were. God, if I can call that back. I had the loft I had in the Bowery had a roof extension. The store downstairs, the lamp store downstairs, the roof went on, so I could open my back windows and crawl out onto this 30 by 40 maybe square of tar. That was my outdoor thing. So I would grow marijuana plants in those plastic milk cartons, those ones that fill it with stuff, and people would come by and then we'd harvest it. It was fun. So that was terrific. Plus the bars were in full swing. I remember at Bonnie and Clyde's one night of just almost being picked up. Women started undressing, and that stuff doesn't happen anymore.
No, it doesn't.
No,
it doesn't. So Robert and Sam both succumbed to AIDS. Tell us about the early days of AIDS and how that affected you and your friends and how that went through.
Yeah, at first, it started out, we started hearing the rumors about, it's in San Francisco. It's not here. We're fine. It's not going to happen here. And it's, funny thing, friends, I have activist friends who started ACT UP, but that wasn't until after Sam had passed away. But my friend Maxine Wolf would say, they're not telling us the truth. They never tell the truth. And she was right, of course, and is always right about that. And Sam was very blasé about it. He said, oh, they'll find something. They always do. Well, it had to have been 1982, 83. We would go to Fire Island, and they would get, I would get bitten by mosquitoes. They wouldn't. I would have welts on my arms. And Sam would say, like, what? He said, you don't, he said, you must be sweeter than me. That's why they like you. And I'm like, I don't know. But I was collecting first edition books at that time. And one of them was Popular Errors Explained from 1870. Sure enough, one of the chapters, it says, it is known that old men and people who are ready to die do not get infected by bed bugs or bitten by vermin because their bodily fluids are so, what did it say, scant and foul. And that was 3 years before anything came out. And it was just, it gives me chills even now. And plus there'd be times he'd get this red rash on his feet, and it would follow him home, back to 1 Fifth Avenue. And he'd say, do you get this? I said, geez, no, Sam, I don't have that. And he said, oh, it'll go away. And it didn't go away. And geez, I would help him pop blisters on his feet, never knowing at the time that this could have been, a transmit. It wasn't. That right. Paranoia was coming soon.
And was Robert going through the same thing?
Robert, he was starting. But Robert was more, out of the three of them, Robert was the most clear-eyed and down to earth. He knew it was bad, and he was going to go. When he started, then he was producing more and more work. Jim was just an angry queen. He would do awful things. He'd break glasses and things. And Sam was, saying like, they'll come up with something. They always do. That was his thing. As we saw them, waste away. Sam's handsomeness was just, was devastated. He got sickest first. I don't know if it was because he was older or what, but he did. And then they went, Sam went, then 2 years later, Robert went, and last left was Jim, who left another year after that.
I understand you were left a lot of their belongings?
Oh, yeah. Well, I remember on Sam's, pretty much on his deathbed, Sam said, well, you should all know what's happening. Robert pretty much gets everything. That's fine. And then he said, in Jim's will, he said, for Jim's will, he said, Roberta, you're the executor. And it's funny, Robert would say to me, it's like, you better hope he doesn't spend all of that before it gets to you. I'm like, Robert, shut up. He said, the guy's going to die. So, Sam entrusted me with some things, but mostly the big thing was, he said, if anything happens to me, and of course it was going to happen, he was going to die, there's something I want you to do. Jim will tell you, and Robert will tell you. And I'm like, of course, Sam. Sure, whatever. And that was the thing. The day he died, early morning, about 4 a.m, Jim called me early. I got there just a few hours later. And then Robert called and said, are you there? And are you doing what Sam wants you to do? And I said, are you sure? He wanted me to destroy Robert's packs of photographs of Robert's. I had seen those Kodak boxes before in his closet, and they were there with the whips and the chaps and stuff. And I didn't pay any attention. It's boxes of photographs. But he wanted these gone, and Robert agreed. I said, are you sure, Robert? And he said, yeah, it's what Sam wants. And he said, it's funny, although Robert had sent Jim to Sam as this gift, he always called him white trash. And he said, well, you're there because you know Jim can't do it and he can't do it right. I'm like, yeah, okay. So there we were with boxes, 10, 12 of those, 8.5 by 11 yellow and black Kodak boxes filled with contact sheets, some of them with full-size prints. And we had to destroy them. Now, here we are at 1/5 Avenue in the penthouse. It's this January, it's cold. I said, what? I thought, okay, let's burn them. Not thinking about photographic paper when it burns. Duh, dumb. So we got this from the apartment. Sam kept another apartment downstairs, small apartment, for the art and for his collection. So I said, Jim, where's the grill we bought, last year? I know. I said, oh, it's in the other apartment. Oh, you're so smart. We can eat. I said, no, Jim. No. And of course, Jim, he was, the poor guy, he was there. He was the only one there. Then when Sam finally took his last breath, I had left a couple of hours earlier. And Patty Smith had been there and she had left earlier.
Wait, are you being raided or something?
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's yeah. See, they heard what I was saying. This is regular in New York.
Okay.
It's fire engines. They'll be gone.
Okay.
So shall we wait?
No, that's fine.
Yeah, you notice I didn't even flinch. It's like, yeah, I didn't even notice.
Well, I was wondering, is it here? That I realized there. All right, so you got the grill, and you're not going to feed Jim.
Yeah, right. He was drinking scotch. He was doing more coke. We were both doing coke. We were hitting off joints, and and we had to. Sam was just gone. His apartment still reeked of him. This is his place, and so we took it up to the roof, just one flight of steps from the penthouse up to the roof. This is 1/5 Avenue. We were 42 floors? God, I should, my memory. So we start putting in the contact sheets and light it, and it's like, oh my God, black smoke, of course, is curling up and plumes of it. And I'm like, put on the lid, Jim, put on the lid. He said, well, no, then they'll go out. Just put on the lid. We'll open the little thing. So we put on the lid. He said, well, it's going to go out. I said, well, open it a little. So we're opening it and closing it. Now it's like smoke signals, right? It's like, we got to stop this. So now we're both hysterical. Jim's laughing. I'm laughing. We're both sitting there. It's like, what are we going to do? This is a serious task. But it was, of course, we saw our own comedy. This is absurd. So I said, okay, let's stop this. Let's take these ashes out of here. Let's put them in a bag. Stone fools. We put them in another garbage bag so they melt through. Anyway, we took that downstairs. Now the doorman calls up. Do you know anything about the smell? No. So now we're back in Sam's apartment. We figure, well, we can't do this. There's no way. How are we going to get rid of all these photographs? I said, get the X-Acto knives, get some Sharpies. And we sat down. Oh, and then Robert calls again. Are you doing this? Like, yes, Robert, we're doing it. So, well, you've got to hurry because his sister's attorneys are going to seal the apartment. It's like, what do you mean seal the, when? He said, I don't know when, but his attorney said, you better do something. So now it's like, okay, Jim, hurry up. So we're cutting and this and that, and Jim is sick himself. He's like, can we eat, honey? Can we eat? I'm like, no. And then I said, of course we have to eat. This poor guy is. So I said, okay, let's take everything, we ripped them as much as we could, put them in shopping bags. I said, let's go out on the street. We're going to put them in the trash bins and leave our fate to the sanitation department of the city of New York. That's all we could do. Because Robert, called again, are you done? It's like, no, Robert, we're not done. This is,
All right, so I have to clarify. So these were pictures that Robert had given Sam?
These were very compromising pictures of Sam, mostly Sam, with men in various, doing things together. And they were shot by Robert. I mean, you could tell because they were beautifully done. Some were not beautifully done. Some were done on the fly, you could tell. But most were beautifully lit. And it's just people and that Sam didn't want known. And he knew I wouldn't. And for 30 years, I haven't talked. And I'm not going to name names now either.
But there are names that we would recognize.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah. It's funny when we were putting them in the grill thing at first. Jim was saying, "Don't look at them, honey." I said, "I don't know." I don't know this. I haven't been out to Fire Island with you guys, and I don't know. I know this stuff,
All right, Roberta, we want another segment. We're going to take a little break right now, but we'll be right back. All right. Roberta, you talked a lot about Sam and Robert, and you're writing a book about them. Tell us about that book.
Yes, I am. A book that has been, 30 years in the making, 40 years. It's hard to do because we trusted each other. And I know Sam trusted me with things he hadn't told anyone else. In a lot of ways, he was for him, I think I was the sister he never had, although he had one. She's still around. And for me, he was the brother I never had, although I had one. There was that closeness and that trust. And if he said, will you do this for me? I did it. And I had no reason to ever not do that. People have asked me about those photographs. They said, "What are you stupid? Why didn't you keep one at least? If I had kept even one, we'd all be living in Paris right now, But no, you don't do that to friends. You just don't. So there's that. So, and in a way, people say, aren't you deifying him? Maybe. A little, but look, I'm a Leo. I deify a lot of people. I'm loyal, and if they want to call it deifying, go ahead. But, I do that to my funky friends who've been in jail as well as patricians like Sam,
Oh, what's the plans for the book? When can we see it?
Well, it's right now in the hands of people I can't say on the West Coast. And we've got some plans for not only it as a book, but other formats, let's say. So I don't want to jinx anything. I'm touching cardboard at the moment. And but it's going well. It's I think part of it is it's hard for me to let it go. Yeah. And I think part of that is I really don't want to let it go, and I really don't want to share any secrets, but still that relationship was so, it affected me in a way that maybe it shouldn't have. Look, I have lost a lover of 12 years to breast cancer and been there at the time of death. I've been there at my father's time of death, at that moment, my mother's time of death, my grandmother. I mean, God, I'm like Charon taking people across the Styx, and why is it I'm so, with Sam, I'm so, it's still so raw. So it's weird. Maybe because, I don't know, maybe because it was more of a friend, this really a thing of equals and just friendship, not love, not family. Not sexual love, not family. Maybe it's that, but honest to God, I haven't figured it out yet. Why he's still so important, really.
You're working on that book. What else do you have? What other projects are you involved in?
What I'm doing is, instead of books, I'm taking a bit of a break and writing essays on Substack.com. I used to write small pieces on Medium.com, but now everyone seems to have shifted over to Substack. So that's what I'm doing, and it's easier for me. It's great. I've written a couple of things, like Brittany Griner should have talked to me first, and others like just snippets, and I'm liking that because look, I wrote 13 historical romances to pay my way through graduate school, and then and the big memoir, and darker books like The Assistants of Vice, where I had a character that was like Sam, only I hid him. I never called him Sam. And I've been hiding this pretty much all my life and distancing myself from things that are so important to me. Maybe the next thing I'll write, actually, I do have a script about losing my love to breast cancer and how that was. And that even had some interest, and I withdrew it. See what a nut job I am? It's like it's hard for me. It's really hard for me to expose those things that are so intimate. It's difficult.
Well, you need someone to write your story. I mean, that is fascinating. Just what we've talked about the last hour is totally fascinating, and there are so many other chapters to tell. Roberta, thank you so much. It's been a fascinating hour, and I really appreciate you sharing your time with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Truly, I really appreciate it. Thank you. It's great to meet you. You're terrific.
Thank you very much.